Hello, everybody. Welcome again to our third OKD working group meeting. We have a kind of packed agenda today, so I'm going to start now. And if you look in the chat, you can see a link to the working group meeting notes and add your name in as an attendee, and we'll just keep track that way. And the first item I have on the agenda here, I'm just bopping back and forth, is one of our co-chairs. We have three chairs, myself, Danny Comilla, and Ben Howard had been chairing as a technical rep from Red Hat from the engineering team, and he's had to step aside to take on another more exciting than OKD project. I think it has something to do with encryption. So that might be more exciting, who knows? At least it is for him. And I wanted to thank him, Ben, for his work getting this stuff up and running and managing the first kickoff of all of the stuff that around the OKD working group. And Christian Golombek, if you'd like to introduce yourself, has generously stepped up to replace Ben Howard. So Christian, why don't you introduce yourself and what you do at Red Hat? Most of us probably know you, but some of us don't.
Yeah, sure. So hello everyone, I'm Christian. Can I do that? So hi everyone. I'm an associate software engineer at Red Hat based out of Berlin. And I've been part of the Fedora Atomic community was part of that for some time, then switched over to Fedora CoreOS, and actually did an Google Summer of Code project last year with Fedora IoT. And after that, I got an internship and got the full-time position in the beginning of this year. So I'm really glad about this opportunity. I'm really motivated in being a bit more welcoming to the community and working towards that. And yeah, I think OpenShift is great, and if we can be a catalyst for innovation as an OKD community, I'd very much like that. If you have any questions, please feel free to approach me either here or via email or on Slack or wherever.
All right. Again, thanks, Christian, for taking this on. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Diane Mueller. I'm the Director of Community Development for basically the Cloud Platform Group at Red Hat, and have been doing community management for OKD since it was origin days, and working on helping to keep this group moving forward and do some project management and organizing for getting more folks to work on this project. So we're both happy to be here. Danny Comilla. Danny, if you want to introduce yourself just quickly, that would be great. And then,
yeah, well, where should I start? Been involved in the CentOS Passig for the last year and a bit, doing the releasing for the RPMs into CentOS repo, and since then just evolved a bit into the Cube community on the SIG docs. And yeah, just a OKD user, basically.
Cool. We love users. So I want to dive right into, and I'm thinking, Christian, maybe you can drive the part B conversation. And if people have other things that they'd like to talk about today, just text me in the chat. So Christian, if you can share your screen and go into the OKD working group charter and show. There was some suggested lazy consensus updates. Show and maybe walk us through the change that you were talking about and on the email thread, and we can see if it's acceptable to the group, and we can send it around for another round of trial approvals.
Hey, does it work? Is it sharing my screen?
Let me see.
Yes, it's fine.
Yep, I can see your screen.
Yes, it does.
I see it.
It's the screen with the charter, right? Or is it the other one?
It's the screen with the charter.
Nice.
You got it.
Okay, perfect. Because I only see black box here. Okay. So yeah, we weren't able to get the charter passed in the first try because we hadn't included the lazy consensus voting specifically. So if we have a vote, we don't want we don't want it to make it necessary for everybody to participate, and that's what lazy voting is for. It implies if you don't vote, it's an implied +1, not a real +1, but you don't need all the people. You don't need quorum each time with the lazy consensus. So there are a few changes in this draft. I can also just pass the link real quick, so you can comment on the HackMD doc yourself. So the biggest changes were in the governance section. It's been reworked a little bit. I don't think there's any huge changes. I do want to do more of the work on GitHub though. So we've got it was just created the OpenShift community repository, which will be the authoritative store for every documents we come up with, for the meeting notes. All this stuff will be stored there. And also on the issues on the community repo, that's the place where the call for agreements will happen. It will also be necessary to publish a call for agreement on the mailing list, but the actual voting, I'd like it to happen on GitHub, just because most of all the code lives there, and most of the people contributing also have an anyway.
And it's easy to count.
And it's easy to count. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So does anyone have any further comments on the changes to the document? Is there anyone?
How do we define activity? Because now that we're not talking about things happening on the mailing list specifically, how will we define activity for basically ripping people out of the working group? Because you say that there has to be work going on, and I don't know what that would be.
Yeah. We can definitely clarify this. So I would say being active, for example, can mean you show up to a meeting. You don't really have to do much more than be in a meeting. You can write something on the mailing list that counts as activity. But yeah, I can definitely make sure to specify this a little bit more. It's just, we just don't want to later have a problem with all the people that don't contribute anymore, that aren't active, and we just want to have a mechanism to clearly point to that says, okay, you haven't been active for, I think it's 6 weeks, 42 days, and then we can remove you from the members list. You can definitely reapply as well. I maybe should specify that as well.
Hey, Christian. This is Dusty. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Cool. Yeah, I kind of brought up this point a little bit on the original charter, but if we don't have a good automated way to disqualify people for, being stale, essentially, then it basically creates a bunch of, if we do it right, it basically creates a bunch of man hours to go through and say, so-and-so was here on this meeting, which was 60 days ago, and now they're inactive, right? So if we go down this route of doing, something based on inactivity, I would suggest we try to automate it as much as possible. That can be something as simple as, we create some sort of Google document that will email everybody that is in our group periodically and say, hey, are you still active in this group? And they can say no or they can say yes, right? But if they don't reply, or if they say no, they'll automatically be removed after a period of time or something like that. I just don't want to create more burden than we need, because if we do that, we're going to be really sloppy, and we're going to periodically run through it and remove people, and then it's going to be arbitrarily done, and then somebody's going to have a complaint. So I think we either need to have named members of the group that votes count, which is kind of exclusive, which I don't necessarily like, but it's easier, or we need to automate that process so that it's easy to do and not arbitrary.
I think also for decisions that need to be quick, I think that would be the concern about blocking quorum. So there's two failure modes. There's we're insufficiently scoped about what it means to participate. So the lazy consensus with a bounded time window is intended to make sure that you give people an opportunity to respond, but not response is not considered does not block progress. And then for shorter discussions, I think that's where the quorum failure mode is, which is if there's people who aren't participating in the working group stalls, we just need to make sure there's some mechanism to make progress there. That could also be bounded lazy consensus as well. I'm not sure, we have majority is needed for consensus. It could be that we scope the majority down to the most impactful decisions, like changing process, and have a more restricted list. And then for all the others, bounded lazy consensus might be sufficient. At least in my experience in Cube, bounded lazy consensus has never been a problem, except for the most contentious issues, which do, need a little bit more thought and effort, and things like elections.
So from my experience in Fedora, I would say that, one, it has never really hurt anybody for people to be continued as members, even if they're not doing all that much, when you have a lazy consensus model implemented. Right. It only is a problem when you don't have lazy consensus and you require quorum. And within Fedora, the general rule is, unless you're asinine, like some of the working groups are in Fedora, you don't require quorum. And if you don't require quorum and you implement the lazy consensus model, which has been the default in Fedora for almost a decade now, you don't usually have these problems. And so I don't know if it makes sense with the change to lazy consensus to also have an automatic kick you out of the working group kind of model in the first place, because it has zero impact one way or the other. So,
Yeah, I kind of agree with that mindset.
For normal work, I would agree with you, but when I read the charter and governing documents, there seems not to be a lazy consensus.
That's changing here. And I think that it was insufficiently changed. I mean, basically, I think what I'm hearing is the charter should be refreshed before we send it out for a vote again to take into account the feedback that you don't need explicit quorum and membership as long as you're using bounded lazy for the majority of things. Is that fair?
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable. So Clayton, or anyone else, does someone have the wording from another SIG group that has lazy consensus written into it in a way that that is clear enough that we could use as an example from one of those other Fedora groups or the K8?
I believe Fedora CoreOS the CoreOS working group operates on lazy. Does it, Dusty?
Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't know if it's written out explicitly. I think we did write it out explicitly in the Atomic Host one. I can go look at it.
Yeah, in Atomic we had one, but we didn't do it for CoreOS, did we?
Yeah. Well, because the default in Fedora from the top down, from console all the way down, is unless you specify otherwise, it's lazy consensus. That was a default that we switched when Remy fixed all of our governance issues during the Core Extras merge, or after the Core Extras merge, rather.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
What do you define as participation? Because I found it there is a Kubernetes Slack, there is OpenShift, GitHub. So what is counted as participation? So only GitHub pulls, solve issues, talk on Slacks. I mean, when
essentially
any days counts.
I think the
essentially
point
any
is that
of those, but
if we go lazy, we shouldn't need it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, exactly.
That was only participation in Cube is only meaningful for election purposes, and we don't have anything in the charter yet on full election. And that was with Cube. There was a serious and strong concern about vendor capture, and so that was one of the primary reasons. I think reserving the contribution stuff for the most significant votes, where you want to ensure that the stakeholders are people who actually are ponying up and caring. If folks here don't feel that is a primary concern, I think we could potentially just defer almost all of the participation requirements until it becomes a problem.
Yeah, one more thing. Should we then also remove the sort of 3-week probationary period after joining, or the 3-week period in which you are not eligible to vote?
I think it's really important because I've had issues with communities before where, you have someone rallying for a vote that they want to go in their favor. So they either create fake accounts, which in this case would be fake emails where we cannot prove the identity. And then suddenly you have, someone creating 50 fake accounts with bots that all get into the working group vote for the person who wants this one outcome. So it's really important to have this included.
Well, no matter what model we pick, that's going to still remain a problem because we're bounding on GitHub as our verification of identity. So I don't know what that would solve. Like it doesn't solve anything because we don't have a way of. Yeah, sure, people can create accounts. They know what they need to do. They have to just wait 3 weeks and they can propose a vote. Making a bot account versus a real person account, there is nothing. The only thing that would fix is if we had some kind of real person verification for every account, and we can't implement that with the way that we're doing this. So I don't know what you want from this because I don't think whatever we do will satisfy that.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
I think there might be, maybe it's possible that we should put the, I do think we want a community best judgment. So like in various things, like there's an arbiter of real humans who are trusted by the community. So in some groups that's a steering committee, in some groups that's a vote by the set of maintainers, which does have that burden of real contributor proof. We basically, in the short term, that is the working group leads. Is there any concern about, for the short term, making sure that escape hatch is covered by the working group leads?
How many people is that currently? So that's 3.
Today. And I don't think there's any reason that we couldn't broaden that to be like the members list that's proposed here. We could come up with a mechanism whereby we active members or something like that if we need to. Usually it's the goal of that is to not make any decisions. Certainly right here, I think we're in a reasonably high trust initial starting state. If that becomes an issue, we could use that as an opportunity to say we need to change the charter because this is becoming a problem.
I think as long as we have an odd number of people for the steering, leadership, whatever, so that we don't deadlock, I think it's fine. I don't know who Danny is, so that's a little bit of a thing. But other than that, I don't have a problem.
Danny has effectively run OKD for most of the year, so he's
okay.
He's the, and I hate to say it this way, but he's the token non-Red Hatter. We need to, and he's not a token member at all. And so probably what I would like to do.
Painful thing here.
I do think that if we have like a 3 set who can break, like who are the arbiters for the kinds of failure modes that we're worried about, we can grow that to a 5-person group and just make sure that Red Hat is only 2.
Sure, and then I'm okay with being one of those people if you want to grow it to 5. So, but yeah, not terribly concerned as long as we keep it in a number that doesn't allow for it, that makes sure we don't deadlock. And that might actually be the one case where we can't have lazy consensus.
Right.
So, because that's basically like Fedora Council can't have lazy consensus. Neither can FPC or FESCO. So, but everything else has lazy consensus because it doesn't matter quite so much.
Cube requires quorum, but it does have lazy consensus beyond quorum. So.
So in order to get this to a state where we are all in agreement, Clayton, could you summarize what you think?
So it sounded like, so correct me if I'm wrong, all the places where we talk about decision making, membership, we still have a definition of quote unquote membership, which is mailing list plus some minimum amount of time just for now. So we don't have to change that. We could say 21 days because probably not likely to be an issue. In any case where voting based on this or membership based on this is challenged, the working group leads decide with a majority vote, including a quorum, and we remove the inactivity and quorum requirements for other decisions. And we just keep, we basically say everything is lazy bounded, lazy consensus based on membership. And we don't have a quorum requirement. And if that becomes an issue, the working group leads are empowered to, I don't know if there's some wording, Neil, that you think might make sense here, or anybody else?
No, I mean, I think that's fine. We could probably steal some specific wording from how the charters for Atomic Host, SIG, and some of the other Fedora things, but what you just said, I think, makes sense. The only thing is I'd probably reduce the eligibility time from 21 days to either 7 or 14, because most of a month is pretty long. I mean, it may be that we don't do voting very often, but having such a long wait for an eligibility period is kind of painful if we decide that we're going to have monthly meetings or something like that.
I think the point of that, well, I mean, like, for example, if something goes out for a vote, we're probably going to give it some amount of time, right, before, we close the voting. So I think the point of that is so that people can't join and vote on something that's already been proposed. Does that make sense?
Why does that matter?
I mean,
the
way I look at it is like, somebody who previously wasn't interested in this group all of a sudden hears about a decision that we're about to try to make one way or the other. And, 100 new people join the group to vote, right? I mean, I think that's what Sonia was referring to earlier, except she was referring to, people skewing the vote with fake accounts versus actual people showing up to vote, right? But it's similar. It's one of those things where
it's the flash mob failure mode for.
Okay.
I think we could probably call it like somebody doesn't like something they read about on Hacker News and comes to be a jerk. So we should probably figure out how to at least keep that in mind. I mean, I do think there's an element here of. I would be okay with having to deal with that exactly one time, as long as we have a fallback mode that allows us to change the charter effectively. And so typically, like Fedora Council, and maybe I'm wrong, like Fedora Council is allowed to make binding decisions, but is governed by a charter that requires a broader set to change. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes. I believe so.
And is the broader set maintainers of Fedora, contributors, or is it a broader set than like people who've actually put things into Fedora?
I think right now it's just the broader packager set, because everyone who's a packager is eligible to vote in all of these things right now. But again, it's a lazy consensus model even for that, although there's a minimum bar for certain circumstances. It's weird. There's a lot of special cases with the fact that Fedora has to deal with the fact that there's less than a third of the people who can work full time on it.
Yep.
So, and the OKD working group at this point in time, I think, is more than 2/3 Red Hatters. So that's not the same failure case.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're expecting that will grow beyond that. I don't think so, because we're not that good at publicizing about this stuff. So I don't know.
We're going to get, Chris, we'll get much better. We will have more Dannys and Neils and others. Trust me. We just need to get through this part and get it going. Yeah, that's really growing this to be more than just Red Hatters is my goal. Dusty, you should have edited.
Yeah, I would probably say once we grow the working group, maybe like we could one potential outcome that we could do is say once we have a larger group of 5, making important changes to the charter becomes easier. So maybe like somewhere between 2 to 4 months is to get to a point where we have like a 5-member working group that can do voting to the point of, for the most part, dealing with all the exceptional cases until we get more established, at which point we could potentially change the charter and we'll have a better base of data on who's maintaining. I would agree with Dusty's point. We should automate as much as possible and look for...
Yeah, I just worry about mainly imposing too much stuff, ahead of time before we actually need it. Like keeping it lightweight makes it a lot easier for things to organically grow. But like as we've talked about so far, I think that the improvements will be more than sufficient to make people happy.
Yeah. To Neil's point, I think things have come so easy to us in the Atomic Host and the CoreOS communities so far that we actually haven't had to grow our rules essentially around this stuff, which is good until you come to a point where a contentious decision is being made and you don't have anything to look back on as far as governing rules, and it gets ugly. So we've been lazy in our community so far there, and we've been lucky, but we could have gotten bit in the butt.
Well, the governance changes in Fedora that happened in 2012 through 2014 were certainly contentious and ugly, but I'm pretty sure we now have safeguards in place for that on the broader scale, but most of the individual SIGs and working groups don't have those problems. So it oftentimes isn't thought about much. I'm not sure if Okd will get to a point where this becomes a problem in the same way that it would have at the higher level governance model within the whole Fedora project. But, we'll see.
So specifically about Okd, should we then, or do we all agree on using the members markdown file as a register, as a list of members, or should we move away from that as well if we want to not put up a barrier that is too great, or should we use it and then have the waiting period? Because there's only going to be people added to that list and never removed, probably, if we don't automate that in some way.
Well, if it's a single text file, then it's going to be a pain in the butt to automate. I'm just going to say that right up front. So there are 2 ways I could see it going. We could have a repo which adds GitHub users as members, and that defines it. Or alternatively, we switch to a directory of members, and it just includes their identities in a file with their GitHub usernames as the text file name.
Yeah, that would probably work
Cube
best.
does have automation around GitHub that we can use for this, like some of the same CI infrastructure stuff that's used to calculate that. We do have a number of those that are fairly easy to just copy for the specific repos. So we could potentially have a short-term contribution. Now, it does not do, I don't know that it does mailing lists, so that would be another challenge. There's a bunch of automation that went into the Cube side, and I do believe we considered some of this as contributions. So.
Yeah, so far my experience with the Cube side of things isn't very positive, but we'll see. It's well.
We could probably manage to take this to a new forum as far as like automating group membership. Ways to do that. I think there's like a lot of different ways to skin that cat, and
I mean, the most important difference between CNCF and OKD is that CNCF uses the CLA as a sign of membership, and I don't want that at all.
But, yeah, and I don't think we had any plans to do that, but I do mean the CNCF is almost completely orthogonal to the Cube governance structure. In fact, CNCF has no role in Cube governance from the perspective of
right, but the Cube governance model that was implemented in Kubernetes and scaled out to all the SIGs is essentially the model CNCF implements in all projects now. And
the
so
CLA is just for assignment of copyright, which is completely separate. Like we don't like I helped write most of these, so maybe I don't misunderstanding what you mean. So we can.
I'm basically saying that there's a number of ways to verify that we won't have, because one, they're too heavyweight, and two, they don't apply, to verify a person's activity, membership, and eligibility. Those things don't necessarily exist in our case, and we need to think of either simpler or alternative mechanisms. My just off-the-cuff proposal is, either we use a repo and manage the users added to it as like people who have read access to it is equivalent to like they're listed with the read permission on GitHub as one way, or the alternative is we have a folder that's called members, and then each individual file represents a person's identity, and they send pull requests to merge them in, and then once they're merged, they're in, and then there could be pull requests to remove them through automation and stuff.
Oh, I mean, I was envisioning the more automated version of that, which we use for Cube elections, which is if you've contributed to a repo, which is comment, PR, or whatever, no membership is required for any of that. So maybe I just misunderstood.
Oh, I did. Okay, yeah, no, I didn't realize that they'd gone to that level for implementing that. My understanding was that they'd done it based on code merge, which implies CLA. So
yeah, no, it comments count, and there's a number of other metrics. Now, I don't think they have all of the metrics that we might want because, but so I can do some follow up, and maybe next meeting I can talk a little bit about what that is or do a summary just so we know what automation is there.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
So this is Diane. I'm just trying to figure out where we landed. And Christian has said he's willing to make the final edits and republish it. And what I'm hoping is that you'll do it in the GitHub repo so that we can log issues against it, and you start using GitHub with the new GitHub repo that is now open.
Exactly.
So could I just ask one little question? So are we using the members.md file to start with, or is there a different mechanism? We've gone back and forth a few times here with suggestions, but is it acceptable to use the members.md file to start with as add your name there and activity is mailing list and yeah.
Would it be easier if we had one file in a directory for each member, and then you can automate the creation and deletion of that file later on, maybe? But yeah, I don't mind the members.md file for the time being either.
Yeah, whatever works. I mean, I just threw out two ideas out there just based on, my simple understanding of automation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
So
I'll definitely think about this a little more, and then tomorrow I will PR my draft of the charter at the community repo and send out another call for agreement on the mailing list, and then voting should happen on the pull request on GitHub. Does that sound good?
Yep, sounds fine. Be sure to send it to all of our mailing lists, not just the OKDWG.
Yeah, I will. I will also put it on the Slack channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. So
from what I understand, basically anybody who is in the working group and wants to participate in the community should essentially subscribe to watching events on the OpenShift/community repo. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So I know some groups in Fedora automatically have their issue trackers send emails to their mailing list, which would be Google groups in this case. I kind of like to allow members to choose right? If they want those notifications or not. So I guess the way we have it right now is good, but promoting OpenShift/community repo so that people in the group know that they should follow that would probably be a good thing to do.
Yep, we can do that. All right. So it sounds like we're close to having a next step for this subject, and Christian's going to take care of that. We also have a review, and maybe Clayton, I'm not sure who wants to drive the review of the draft OKD roadmap on the agenda.
That was I put up the draft, and we couldn't have a vote on it yet because we don't have a charter yet. So that's going to be the next thing. Directly after the charter vote has concluded, I'll start another vote for the roadmap.
Okay, and
of course, we're already trying to get some stuff on the roadmap done behind the scenes, just to start moving a little on it.
Do you want to walk through? We have a few minutes left today. Do you want to walk through that? And then what I would also ask is to add that draft to the GitHub repo as well, so that people can comment using the issues mechanisms of GitHub. And grand debates can happen by wherever they need to. So are you sharing the screen? Sorry, I'm sharing. There you go. Okay, perfect.
So this is the roadmap. I presented it, I think, was it in the first meeting? It hasn't changed drastically. It's still, we have a few general guidelines that we don't want to divert from at the moment that should always be met. And then we have 3 phases. Currently, we're in phase 0. And this is really just get an MVP out. And it won't diverge from how OCP does things too much, just for us to be able to do these things quickly to enable this. I don't know. I presented that last time. Are there any open questions still? I think I addressed most of the comments on it.
I have one important question about the installer. I see here only the Fedora CoreOS installer, but not the platform, because the installer have selection on which platform you can install it, AWS, Azure, or something like this, and this is not mentioned here. So maybe we can add some decided or destination platform where the MVP should be able to be installed, or is it always AWS and all other platforms coming later on?
I think it's good.
Yeah, go on.
Clayton here.
Whoever else was going to jump in, please jump in.
I was trying to kind of say, Alexander, I think it's fair to say the platform supported will be whatever the platforms are supported by the OCP. However, if you look on phase 0, second bullet point, ensure installer is able to bootstrap a cluster from FCOS base. I believe that's the only delta. So in terms of the platforms, whatever the platforms are supported over there should be here. So hopefully maybe that answers your question.
It basically means we should be starting from whatever Red Hat has been talking about for OCP 4.3, which is basically everything.
Is there a Fedora CoreOS block, just to make sure that we're all on the same page? Fedora CoreOS we would need on all the platforms in order to accomplish that. Are there any that folks know that Fedora CoreOS doesn't support yet?
Yeah. So we have it right now. We're currently in our preview release, and we're adding platforms. Right now, we only have AWS. I guess bare metal support and also like virtualization support. I think if we're delivering an OpenStack image yet or not, but yeah, we are. So more or less, we will be adding platforms for Fedora CoreOS, but it won't strictly match what is going to be OK or OCP 4.3.
Dusty, quick one. I saw obviously at the moment the nightly builds. You guys produce the OVA as well as QCOW and obviously the bare metal. Have I assumed wrongly that those are not workable, so to speak, at this point in time, even if they are nightly builds?
Yeah. Well, I guess it depends on right. the implication. More or less, they're part of the preview release, which basically means don't store your favorite pictures on there that's not backed up anywhere else, right? Don't use it for production workloads or anything like that. If you grab an image from our nightly outputs and it works, that's great. As far as platforms go, we are working on wiring up the uploads to other clouds. So, for example, you might see an image that is output in our output artifacts that is for a particular cloud before you actually see it show up in that cloud because we haven't quite wired up the uploading and the making it available. So yeah, if you have any specific questions, you can grab us in #Fedora-CoreOS.
So maybe for phase zero, we just say AWS and then phase one, because the goal is to exit phase 0 as quickly as possible. So then we just say phase 2 is list of platforms is or intersection of Fedora CoreOS and current installer repo.
The direct second question to this is because you said the registry or the image is available. Currently, you need a pull permissions to get the images from Quay. For OKD, this should be not possible, not necessary. So this is also in the future that you don't need to register on Red Hat sites, right?
Yeah, so the fifth bullet, or what was the fifth bullet, create OpenShift CI that injects kubelet and cryo as machine OS content into standard Fedora CoreOS image, and then OS containers. Effectively, that is the prereq for having a totally publicly accessible OKD payload. Right now, there is an OKD payload. It has rel in it. It lasts for 3 days, and then we delete it, so it's available for development use. But the moment we have the Fedora CoreOS, we need to change that, and then we would start retaining those longer.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, we should probably call that out a little bit more in the create CI, and maybe say like and publicly accessible OKD image, or non-credential required or whatever.
So I put in the platforms that are supported by both FCOS and OCP will be supported by OKD. Does that meet that? The point we were talking about earlier, the platforms?
I mean, as long as we have people being able to use it locally and in AWS and OpenStack at the minimum with FCOS and OKD, then I don't see a problem for MVP.
Okay. So with the local libvirt setup, that is possible with the installer right now, but it's
broken.
It's dev only. So, well, I haven't tested it in a while, but it's only meant to be used locally for deving. Have you tested it? Is it broken at the moment?
Yeah, I tested it last month and the month before that. It's been consistently broken. It does not work the way you would hope it does.
Yeah, so I can't say that we can promise to deliver that for OKD then if that doesn't work, because we have the container ready, the cloud ready, what was it? Code ready containers, code ready thing.
I mean, that thing is supposed to use the installer as well, so that's also broken by default.
So libvirt is a challenge just because of it has to be completely tied to an OS version, which means it's completely non-portable. And so that's, I think, the biggest gap there. I don't think that it is a requirement that we don't. The reason why it's not enabled by default for people is partially because of that today. It only works on a very limited set of operating systems. So maybe we put that in phase. I'm a little concerned. Like, I think we need a sustainable technical approach for that as well. Either we put it in a possible candidate item for medium term. I agree it's very useful. It's just I
mean, most people are not going to be able to use it if they don't have a way to run it locally. That's the biggest problem.
Right, and if you have all the necessary libvirt stuff lined up, yes. And so I think that maybe what we could say is we do try to get the libvirt stuff working in phase one as a stretch goal, and then when we get into phase one, we need to have a more serious discussion about how it's possible, just because of the challenges around that historically.
Right.
All right.
Ben. So, did you capture all that, Christian? No, that was quite a bit.
So I put in another bullet on phase one, enable libvirt as a platform.
On phase zero, we're gonna have to extend the next to last bullet point, the create CI OpenShift CI. That just to extend a bit to include what Clayton said with regards to the pool secret.
Yeah, and I think
they will not.
Yeah, I think that's like take the existing OKD, replace RCOS with FCOS, make it publicly available.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how would you want me to phrase? That's this line, right? The create OpenShift CI.
Probably just took this. Sorry, I wasn't signed in yet. I'll go to it.
I'm not sure if you have edit rights. I can add you though.
I do not.
GitHub is coming soon.
Is it just Clayton
Someday
at Red Hat?
It's Smarter Clayton
All right.
at gmail.com.
You got to use them personal email addresses.
That's right.
Mm.
Mm.
You have to be in the real world.
Yep, no bubbles for you.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments on this? Any other questions while we're doing this?
Not from my side. I hope when should we hold the next meeting? In 2 weeks again?
I think 2 weeks would be good.
Yeah.
And that brings us to, let me look at a schedule here. I haven't got a calendar in front of me, but let's see. Week
17, which I don't think it will go very well with the OpenShift command, no? Dan?
I'm pretty sure I can make it. I will be somewhere near Milan, as will Danny and a few others. But I think it shouldn't be predicated on my ability to do this. I should be able to call in regardless of. There's Wi-Fi everywhere in the world. I just want to keep the cadence going, and hopefully by then we'll have the vote adjudicated and closed. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about is the Okd landing page and any suggestions or changes to that based on, I'm definitely going to add the community repo link to it. But if people want to take a look over the next 2 weeks at the okd.io site and give me any feedback on that and changes to verbiage or whatever, or additions that should be made, I'd appreciate that. And that site is okd.io, if you didn't know.
It's too bad we can't have mini shift for OKD4. That's a nice way to try things.
I mean, I know.
Agreed. This was really nice.
Michael was looking at the Ansible stuff. That might help too. I mean, ultimately, if there is a desire to support the limited set of things that you can do if you install on top of an OS, that might open the door for more of the mini shift type scenarios. But then you just don't get the guarantee that when you do a rolling update of the control plane, you get it. So I think maybe I think that's a good avenue for exploration as we get out of phase 0, which is maybe some of the flexibility that folks might want around configuring other operating systems might actually lend itself to you can just install it on those platforms.
Which is what led to my original ask, I think it was last month, about making it so that we use package layering for overlaying the OKD stuff, because that makes it super easy to basically reuse the same work for either the OS tree variant with the FCOS versus the regular variant or the CentOS or whatever. However you want to lay that out. So, but again, we still have to have something first.
Yeah. All right. So, any other topics we should be covering today? Because we're almost to the end of our hour. We have a few other things going. Is there anything else that anyone would like to bring up?
In the mailing list, some folks said, suggested different towers and such like, and there is Gladison, who is from New Zealand, and poor guy, he's trying to kind of join and help a bit.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't kind of work very well with the current time, because obviously it's 4 a.m. for him. And so he's happy, even if we move it a bit like 1 hour late. I know it's, for folks like myself and others might be a bit, we're going to push a bit late for us, but then, it doesn't compare with him, who's going to have to wake up at 5 a.m. So I don't know. I know various folks commented already saying, it doesn't work. Neil also said it doesn't work for him. But I don't know. Maybe we can find somehow.
If I can't have it move earlier. Later
no.
is fine. Earlier is not.
No. I was saying later, 1 hour later.
1 hour later is fine. 1 hour earlier is not.
No. Earlier, that means will be even worse for him, I guess.
Yeah, but, I just can't do earlier.
Yeah.
I think the moral of the story is time zones are really hard. In the Atomic Working Group, for a period of time, we were running, meetings during around this time. Then we also had meetings that were kind of more so focused on the Asia Pacific time zones. So, like, if we get enough interest, I think it would be cool to also have something like that. If we get some growth, and we also have interested contributors in time zones who are possibly willing to run those meetings. As far as specific times, that's always going to be hard. One thing that we've done in at least the Atomic Working Group and Fedora Core OS is we've decided to stick with UTC. So whatever hour we choose our meetings to be, we actually stick with UTC. So if you're in a country that observes, daylight savings changes, the meeting actually moves for you. This is a pain in the butt, but it also means that nobody is confused about when the meeting is, right? Because it's always going to be XYZ time UTC, and people have different times of year. UTC or daylight savings might change on this day in this country, and then 3 weeks later in another one. So that's just how we found it to be most useful.
Okay, so for the time being, I guess we'll keep it with UTC, maybe moving forward, and I will sync up with folks from APAC. Maybe I will split, and I will have a sync up with them just until we get more folks in that area.
Yeah, I'm happy if maybe we could host an ACPAC and EU friendly. Shall we say times? We could even rotate. I've seen that done. So like some weeks, but I think in the infancy of this group, even if we just adjusted it for the next one to be at 1700 UTC, so that it would be an hour later for the person in ACPAC. I could do that. I'd suggest maybe that's the user friendly thing to do for the next go round. But like I'm on the Kubeflow stuff, and we do two meetings every month, one in the morning for EU and one in the evening, and the chairs attend both. So that's, it's more of a burdensome for the chairs, but not for all of the attendees. But in these early days, I would really rather have everybody in one meeting, so that the conversation is very valuable, I think. So if we could adjust for a little while to 1700 UTC, I'm fine with that. My schedule is, Clayton, what's your schedule like? Does that work for you on Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Yeah, on the 17th. So if we say, yeah, I try. So if we, it sounds like lazy-ish consensus here to do it at 1700 UTC on the 17th of September is the next meeting. And then we are now at the top of the hour. So Christian and I have a few things to do, and we'll get that GitHub stuff up and get the charter out, and hopefully everybody can review it and make comments, and we will call a vote before the next meeting in the next week or so, and move on from charter talk to actual doing chalk. So, and I know everybody's actually doing, so that was being facetious. So thank you guys for your time, and thank you, Christian, for stepping up. And we'll talk to you all, I'm sure, again on Slack before then, but on the 17th at 1700 UTC. And Fernando, you're always welcome to lurk.
Thank you, Diane, and thanks everybody for joining in, and see you next time.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks.
And Christian and I will upload the video as soon as it's done processing, and send the link out on the working group page along with the notes again. But we will get everything up on GitHub in the next coming couple of days. So we'll stop using Google Docs for notes.
Thank y'all.
Yes.
Take care, guys. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.